They gave us tickets. They told us we were going to see Johnny Carson. They told us we would laugh, relax, and go home happy. Nobody warned us what was really going to happen on that stage. Nobody could have. I was 22 years old. I didn't sleep for 3 days afterward. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My girlfriend thought I was coming down with something. I wasn't sick. I was changed. 50 years later, I'm still careful who I tell this story to, because once you hear it, it stays with you. NBC Studios in Burbank, California. November 1971. Friday night, a little after 11. The Tonight Show was rolling along like any other episode, but backstage, in the narrow hallway between dressing rooms, things were already falling apart. It had started 3 weeks earlier in Johnny Carson's office. He was sitting with his producer, Fred de Cordova, looking for something big to boost the ratings during sweeps. "Bring Bruce Lee back," Johnny said, leaning back in his chair. "The audience loved him last time. The mail was crazy. People are still talking about it." Fred nodded. Bruce was between projects and always good for TV. But Johnny wanted more than a repeat. "I want tension," he said with that famous grin. "Something people will talk about on Monday. What if we pair him with someone huge? Someone so big the audience thinks there's no way Bruce can handle it. Then we just let them interact. No script, no choreography, just see what happens." Fred thought about it. "Who are you thinking?" "André the Giant," Johnny replied. 7 feet tall, over 400 pounds. He's wrestling all over the East Coast. People call him the 8th wonder of the world. He's got size, personality, and an ego. Perfect contrast. The plan was set. Bruce accepted quickly. He wanted the American exposure. André's team rearranged his schedule when they heard about 28 million viewers. It sounded simple on paper, but plans have a habit of breaking when they meet reality. André's flight from Philadelphia landed in Los Angeles that Friday afternoon. He had barely slept, crammed into first-class seats that still weren't big enough. The world was never built for a man his size. By the time he reached the studio, he was in a foul mood and had already started drinking. Wine, beer, whatever was in his dressing room. He wasn't falling down drunk by normal standards, but for André it loosened something dangerous. Bruce arrived earlier, calm and focused as always. He stretched in his dressing room, went through his usual routine and waited quietly. No drama, just readiness. Around 8:45 p.m. the trouble started. André left his dressing room to use the bathroom. As he walked down the hallway, he passed Bruce's open door. Inside, Bruce was shadowboxing, fast, precise movements, feet barely touching the floor, sharp breaths cutting the air. André stopped. He filled the entire doorway, blocking the light. He watched for a few seconds, then let out a deep, mocking laugh that echoed down the hall. Bruce stopped and turned. Their eyes met for the first time. "So, you're the little kung fu man," André rumbled, his French accent thick. "The one Johnny thinks is so impressive. The most impressive physical specimen he's ever had on the show." He leaned in, the wooden doorframe creaking under his weight. "I have seen impressive. You are not impressive. You are small, fragile. If we weren't on television, I would show you what real strength looks like." Bruce stood perfectly still. No fear, no anger, just calm focus. "You're blocking my doorway," he said quietly. André's face hardened. "In my world, little men know their place." "This isn't your world," Bruce replied, voice even. A production assistant named Gerald Myers turned the corner at that moment and froze. He saw the giant filling the doorway and felt his stomach drop. André straightened up. "Tonight, on that stage," he said, pointing one thick finger at Bruce, "I'm going to pick you up like a child. 28 million people will see what you really are. A toy. And after tonight, no one will take you seriously again." Then he turned and walked away, each step shaking the pictures on the walls. Gerald rushed into Bruce's room. "Mr. Lee, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Should I get security? We can cancel the segment." Bruce looked at him calmly. "Gerald, how long have you worked here?" 2 years, sir." "Have you ever seen an episode people still talked about weeks later?" "A few." "What made them memorable?" "Something unexpected happened." Bruce smiled faintly. "Then tell Fred the show goes on exactly as planned, no changes. André comes out after me." But he threatened to. I heard him, Bruce said. Every word. He made a promise. I want to see if he keeps it. Gerald stood there for a second, clipboard shaking in his hands, then hurried off to tell the producers. Bruce went back to his quiet preparation like nothing had happened. He adjusted his tie, rolled his shoulders, and waited with that same calm stillness he always carried. Back in Andre's dressing room, the Giant was pacing. The floor creaked under him. He drank another beer, then another. His manager Frank tried to calm him down, but Andre wasn't listening. "This little man thinks he is impressive," he muttered. "Johnny Carson says he is more impressive than me. We will see about that on television." The show started on time. Johnny Carson walked out, did his monologue, and the audience laughed in all the right places. Everything felt normal. Then Johnny introduced the first guest. "My first guest tonight is a man who, the last time he was here, broke all our records for fan mail. He's a martial artist, an actor, a thinker, and one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. Please welcome Bruce Lee." The curtain opened. Bruce stepped out to a huge ovation. The studio audience stood and clapped like they already knew something special was coming. Bruce shook Johnny's hand, sat down, and the conversation flowed easily. They talked about philosophy, being like water, and Bruce did a gentle demonstration on Johnny's hand that left the host wide-eyed. The audience loved it. Laughter, gasps, perfect television. Then came the moment everyone remembers. "Bruce, I want you to stay right there," Johnny said, his voice carrying that familiar playful tone, but with something else underneath. "Because my next guest is someone I think you'll find very interesting. He stands nearly 7 feet tall. He weighs over 400 pounds. They call him the 8th wonder of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome André the Giant." The curtain parted again. The reaction from the audience wasn't applause. It was a collective gasp. André stepped onto the stage, and the whole set seemed to shrink. Johnny, who was 6 feet tall, suddenly looked small. The desk looked like toy furniture. The painted Los Angeles skyline behind them looked like it belonged in a dollhouse. André wore a black suit that must have used enough fabric for 3 normal men. He walked slowly toward the desk, each step sending a faint vibration through the studio floor. The audience could feel it in their seats. Bruce stayed seated, turned slightly in his chair, watching André approach. In those few seconds, his eyes took in everything. Stride, balance, the slight hitch in the right knee, the way the Giant favored one side. He was calculating, measuring, preparing, without looking like he was preparing. André reached the desk but didn't sit. He stood there towering over everyone, looking down at Bruce like a mountain looking down at a pebble. "So, this is the little man Johnny thinks is so impressive," André said, his deep voice rumbling through the microphones. "The most impressive physical specimen on the show." The studio went dead quiet. 28 million people watching at home leaned closer to their TVs. Johnny tried to keep things light. "André, welcome. We've got a special reinforced chair for you right here. Please have a seat." André ignored the chair. "I like to stand when I meet small people," he said. "It reminds them of their place." Bruce hadn't moved. He sat there completely calm, legs crossed, hands resting easily. His face showed no fear, no anger, just quiet focus, the kind of focus that made people nervous because it didn't look human. Johnny laughed, trying to steer the moment back to humor. "André, Bruce was just telling us about his philosophy, being like water, adapting, using speed and skill instead of just power. As a wrestler who relies on size and strength, what do you think about that idea?" André looked down at Bruce again. Then he laughed, that same deep, mocking sound from the hallway. "Speed and technique," he repeated. "I will show you speed and technique." He moved faster than anyone that size should be able to. One massive hand reached down, grabbed the armrest of Bruce's chair and lifted. The entire chair, with Bruce still sitting in it, rose 6 inches off the ground, held in the air by one arm like it weighed nothing. The audience screamed, not cheered, screamed. Johnny shot up from his seat. Ed McMahon half stood, hand reaching for the phone. The camera operators froze, unsure where to point, and Bruce Lee, suspended in the air in a chair held by a giant, did something no one expected. He didn't panic. He didn't grab the arms or struggle. In the split second the chair left the floor, Bruce uncrossed his legs, shifted his weight, and stood up on the seat of the chair. Now he was balanced on a chair being held in the air, eye level with André the Giant for the first and only time. Their faces were less than 2 feet apart. André's expression changed. The mockery disappeared. Something colder took its place. Bruce looked straight into the giant's eyes and said 5 words everyone heard clearly. "Put the chair down now." The studio was completely silent. You could hear the hum of the stage lights. 28 million people across America sat frozen in front of their televisions. No one changed the channel. No one even blinked. André's massive arm started to tremble. Not from the weight. Bruce and the chair were nothing to a man who regularly lifted grown wrestlers over his head. It trembled because something was happening that his body couldn't explain to his brain. 2 fingers from Bruce's right hand were pressed gently but precisely into the soft spot on the inside of André's wrist, right between the tendons. The giant's hand opened against his will. His fingers released the chair. The nervous system that had obeyed André for 30 years suddenly listened to someone else. As the chair began to drop, Bruce moved. He didn't jump. He stepped. 1 foot on the armrest, 1 foot on Johnny Carson's desk, and suddenly he was standing on the desk, looking down at André the Giant, looking down at the 8th wonder of the world on live television in front of 28 million people. The chair hit the floor with a loud crack that sounded like a gunshot. The audience jumped. Johnny had backed against the painted backdrop. Ed McMahon had his hand on the phone. The band leader Doc Severinsen was standing with his trumpet still in his hand, mouth open, and Bruce Lee stood perfectly balanced on the desk in his neat navy suit, tie still straight, not a hair out of place. He looked down at André with calm, focused eyes. No triumph, no anger, just quiet certainty. "I asked you to put the chair down," Bruce said, his voice carrying clearly without a microphone. "You chose not to, so I solved the problem. That is what I do. I don't wait for the world to make space for me. I adapt. I overcome. Size is not everything, André. Precision matters more." André stood there staring up at the smaller man. For the first time in his adult life, he was looking up at another human being. His brain couldn't process it. He was supposed to be the biggest, the strongest, the one everyone looked up to. Now, a man less than half his weight was standing above him on a desk, calm as still water. The audience was so quiet you could hear breathing. Johnny Carson, the master of television, did what only he could do. He started laughing. Not nervous laughter. Real, full Johnny Carson laughter that broke through the tension like sunlight through clouds. "Bruce," he said, still chuckling as he stepped back toward his desk, "in 30 years of this show, I have never had a guest stand on my desk, and I have to say, you're the first one I didn't mind." The audience exploded with laughter and applause. The tension cracked. People started cheering. But it wasn't just relief. It was awe. They had just seen something impossible. Bruce looked down at Johnny, smiled, and dropped lightly from the desk back into his chair in one smooth motion. No stumble, no adjustment. He landed, crossed his legs, and straightened his tie like nothing unusual had happened. André stood motionless for a few long seconds. Then something no one expected occurred. He sat down. The giant pulled the reinforced chair closer, lowered his 420-pound frame into it, and sat. The chair groaned but held. André looked at his right hand, the one that had been holding the chair. He opened and closed it slowly, still feeling the strange tingle where Bruce's fingers had pressed. He turned to Bruce. "I have never met a man like you," he said. His deep voice cracked slightly on the last word. The audience erupted again. This time the cheer was different, deeper, more respectful. They weren't just watching entertainment anymore. They were witnessing 2 worlds meeting in a way no one had planned. Johnny leaned forward, eyes bright. "André, help us understand what we just saw. What happened there?" André looked at his hand again, then at Bruce. "I have been the biggest man in every room since I was a boy," he said slowly. "Every arena, every country. I have never been afraid of any man. I came here tonight thinking this small man was a joke. Then he made my hand open. I did not choose to let go. My body listened to him instead of me. No one has ever done that. I weigh over 400 pounds and he controlled me with 2 fingers. He turned fully toward Bruce. How? Bruce uncrossed his legs and leaned forward a little. Your size is a gift, he said, but it also makes every nerve more exposed. The bigger the target, the easier it is to find the right spot. Strength is good, but precision and understanding can overcome it. I don't fight size. I fight the weaknesses that come with it. André stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something no one backstage had ever seen him do before. He extended his huge hand, not to grab or intimidate, but to shake. Bruce took it. His hand disappeared inside André's grip. They shook once. Firm, respectful. 2 men from completely different worlds acknowledging each other on live television. Johnny looked into the camera, his voice carrying real emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been doing this show for years. I've had presidents, astronauts, and legends on this desk. But what you just saw tonight, that was something real, and real is rare in this business. The show went to commercial. When it came back, the energy after the commercial break, the rest of the show felt different. Johnny kept things light, asking both men questions and letting the conversation flow naturally. André was quieter than usual. He listened more than he spoke. Every time Bruce said something, the giant would nod slowly, thinking deeply. The audience could feel the shift. What started as a potential disaster had turned into something meaningful. When the show ended, the studio audience gave both men a long standing ovation. People were still talking excitedly as they filed out. No one wanted to leave. They had just seen television history. Backstage in the narrow corridor between the dressing rooms, something even more surprising happened. André was sitting on the concrete floor, his back against the wall, long legs stretched across the entire hallway. Bruce sat beside him. 2 men who had nearly clashed earlier were now talking quietly like old friends. André's voice was low. How did you do that with my wrist? He asked. I've lifted cars. I've thrown men twice your size across rings. But 2 fingers from you, and my hand opened like it belonged to someone else. Bruce explained calmly, using simple words. He talked about pressure points, nerve clusters, and how the body's own wiring could be used against it. He showed André on his own arm gently, demonstrating without causing pain. The giant listened like a student on his first day of school, focused, respectful, hungry to understand. I have always been the biggest, André said after a while. People look up to me. They fear me. They cheer me. But no one has ever made me look up. Not until tonight. Not until you stood on that desk and looked down at me like I was just another man. Bruce nodded. Size is only one kind of strength. There are many kinds. You have great power, André. But power without control can become a cage. Learn to use it wisely, and nothing can stop you. They sat there for nearly 20 minutes. The production crew walked around them carefully, not wanting to interrupt. Gerald Myers, the young production assistant, watched from the end of the hall. He would remember that scene for the rest of his life, the giant and the small man sitting side by side on the floor, talking like equals. Before they left, André extended his hand again. This time it wasn't for a shake. It was an open offer of friendship. Bruce took it. They held the grip for a long moment. You are a good man, André said. I was wrong about you. I am sorry for the things I said earlier. Bruce smiled. We all make mistakes when we feel challenged. The important thing is what we do after. You listened. That takes strength too. 3 weeks later, a large envelope arrived at Bruce Lee's home in Bel Air. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was enormous, each letter almost an inch tall, written by hands too big for normal paper. It read simply, You are the only man who ever made me feel small. Thank you. It was the best feeling of my life. Your friend, André. André never spoke publicly about that night in detail, but those close to him noticed a change. He was still the giant, still dominant in the ring, but he carried himself with a little more humility, a little more respect for opponents who looked smaller or weaker. He started asking questions about martial arts training. He became more curious about different fighting styles instead of dismissing them. Bruce continued his own path. The Tonight Show appearance gave him even more visibility in America. People who had never heard of him before now wanted to know more. His movies in Hong Kong were already huge, but this night helped bridge the gap to a wider audience. For the rest of his life, Bruce would remember the giant who learned to look up. He told close friends it was one of the most satisfying moments of his career, not because he won, but because two very different men found common ground when the world expected them to clash. The story of that night spread quietly at first, then louder as the years went by. Clips from the show became legendary. People who watched it as kids grew up telling their own children about the night the giant met the small man who stood on the desk. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a lesson that stayed with anyone who saw it. Size doesn't decide everything. Respect can be earned in the strangest ways, and sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is show another that they are more than their appearance. André and Bruce never shared the stage again. But that one night was enough. It changed both of them, and through them, it changed how many people thought about strength, courage, and what it really means to be impressive. The lights went down, the audience went home, and the studio crew cleaned up the stage. But the night didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. What happened in that hallway stayed with both men long after the applause faded. André kept the memory close. He told a few close friends years later that standing on that stage, looking up at Bruce Lee on the desk, was one of the most important moments of his life. "I thought the world worked one way," he said once. "Then a smaller man showed me it worked another. I was never the same after that." He carried himself differently in the years that followed. Still the giant, still dominant in the ring. But he showed more respect to opponents, more curiosity about other styles. He even started experimenting with some basic martial arts ideas in his training. The man who once mocked kung fu actors now wanted to understand them. Bruce never bragged about the night. For him, it was just another chance to share what he believed. He told Linda and a few close students about the giant who learned to listen. He was proud not because he beat André, but because two very different people found respect when the world expected conflict. A few months later, Bruce's film career in America started to take off. The Tonight Show appearance helped open more doors. People who had seen him that night wanted to know more about the calm, focused man who stood on the desk and changed a giant's mind. The story of that evening lived on in martial arts circles and late-night TV lore. Clips were replayed. People who watched as kids told their own children about it. It became one of those rare television moments that felt bigger than entertainment. It felt like truth. Gerald Myers, the young production assistant, kept quiet about what he saw in the hallway for over 30 years. When he finally told the story, his voice still shook a little. "I saw two men who should have been enemies sitting on the floor talking like old friends," he said. "The giant asking questions, the small man teaching with patience. That was the real show that night." André passed away in 1993. Bruce had left us much earlier, in 1973. But the night they shared stayed alive in the stories people told. It became a legend about what happens when ego meets understanding, when size meets skill, when two worlds collide and somehow find common ground. For anyone who saw it live or heard the full story later, the lesson was clear. Never judge a person by how they look. Never assume strength only comes in one form. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen, learn, and let yourself be changed. I was 22 when I sat in that studio audience. I'm 72 now. My hands still remember the shaking. My mind still sees Bruce standing on that desk, calm as still water, looking down at the giant with quiet respect. Some nights, I still can't sleep when I think about it, because once you see something like that, you never forget it, and maybe that's the real magic of that November night in 1971. Not the drama, not the shock, but the simple, powerful truth that stayed long after the cameras went dark. Real strength isn't about being the biggest. It's about being willing to learn, even from someone smaller than you. And sometimes, the greatest victories happen quietly in hallways after everyone else has gone home.